Welcome to Fantasy First Aid, the 2010 Draft Special. I am your host, the Tutor. And before I show you my draft special cheat sheet, I just want to talk to you a little bit about the formula that I have when developing the cheat sheets. And in the formula, the things I take account are the ADPs of major sites and analysts around the country, the strength of schedule of a player's team, the strength of schedule of a player's team during our fantasy football season. You have the offensive line strengths, what option players are on their team, how good the quarterback's receivers are. If you have a very good quarterback but not so good receivers, that's going to hurt their values. And how good are the quarterbacks for the receivers? So if you have a very good receiver, his value certainly drops if you don't have a very good quarterback on that team. And the first thing we're going to talk about are wide receivers because these are just this is one of the toughest positions to draft because there's so many of them. And real quickly, I'm not going to go over the list too much because you can certainly send me an email to try to get the list. I can send you a printout of these names. Uh, you're not going to see too many differences of what you have possibly been studying or what you think. Um, this is just kind of what my formula has come up with, and Andre Johnson is certainly the number one receiver on the board with Randy Moss and Wayne and the normal Fitzgerald and Austin and White. Not much surprised. Terrell Owens is certainly moving up with his new team. Steve Smith and Anquan Bolden, still fantasy relevant, but definitely not as important as they were in the past. Um, you got some rookies on the end in Golden Tate and Dexter McCluster and Devin, Dev Bryant and young guys like Brian Hartland and Devon Bass and Mike Thomas and Mike Williams, and those are guys that later on you might see them as sleepers, but for now, those are guys that are getting drafted towards the end of the draft and sometimes not even being drafted at all. Running backs, list of 46 that will certainly, probably all of them will be drafted um, during your draft, depending on the players that you have. I certainly hope so, depending on uh, people's strategy in terms of handcuffing their starting running backs. And one guy you won't see on this list is Brian Westbrook. I don't see his value creeping up just yet, but he's another guy that will certainly be drafted, and he will certainly be a very important handcuff to have to Frank Gore if you do draft Frank Gore. One thing that you probably see that's just shooting at you right now is Adrian Peterson at number 4. That's just the way my formula worked. He doesn't have a spectacular offensive line like Ray Rice does. His strength of schedule this year is brutal, and as Maurice Jones-Drew, his strength of schedule is one of the easiest in the NFL this year. Those are some factors that came across, and at the time, Brett Favre is still considering, and AP season uh, it's a count of what Favre does. If Favre comes back the way he can play, AP's definitely going to be a very good player. Last year he had 21 touchdowns. I wouldn't expect 21 touchdowns out of him this year. So he falls at 4. He's a very good running back, but he falls at 4. You see a surprise rookie down in number 11 with Ryan Matthews. He's going to put up some good numbers this year. Other rookies and Best and Spiller in that second list uh, certainly may have good years, but they're not worth being a top 3 or 4 round draft pick just quite yet. Quarterbacks, not going to go over this too much. You're not going to see much surprise here. This is probably around what you're thinking. Rodgers beats out Breeze in my formula. The rest of the top 10 are probably what you think. Flacco, McNabb, and Barr are just right outside the top 10. All those quarterbacks are a pretty good option to have as your number 1 quarterback on your team. You got your rookie Bradford towards the end. Matt Stafford and Mark Sanchez still hasn't cracked the top 15 yet. And suspended Big Ben falls at 16, but he'd be certainly a very good second quarterback to have on your team. Tight end. If you watched my last show, you know that tight end. Um, to me, I like to draft the top two tight ends need to be a top 10 tight end in the league. So I wouldn't even look at that second list. I just look at the first list. I try to get two of those tight ends uh, and make sure that you don't have the same bye weeks on them. Uh, you're probably not going to see much surprise here. Finley and Selleck have both been moving up this year. Witten and Daniel, the Winslow are still very good players, and they certainly can be a very good number one tight end for your team. If you watched my last show, you know why I don't have kickers or defense. A list for them. Real quickly, who to avoid? I would have definitely avoid Houston's backfield. I've been doing it for a couple of years. It's just they're not trustworthy yet. Jerome Harrison, it could possibly be a one-year bust, and he certainly got a rookie on his butt right now, and who could win the job by week 4 or 5. Jamal Charles had a very good season last year, but with Thomas Jones coming over, you're gonna actually see his numbers drop a little bit. As you know, Thomas Jones is still a very good player. Um, you have your I have actually 4 Lions players on here, and just one of those things that until you can prove that you are fantasy relevant, you can't be fantasy relevant, and you know, one of them may have a good season, but I wouldn't count on it. Matt Stafford's still young; he's still learning. Pettigrew is not even a first option tight end on this team anymore. Nate Burleson, he may want to break out, but it's going to be awfully tough to break out with this young quarterback and a horrible offensive lineman on their team. And Best is going to try to run the show, but it's going to be very tough for him to put very good fantasy numbers up. Couple receivers tandems are the Bears and um, also the Colts, number 3 receivers. It's tough already to pick receivers, let alone figuring out what receivers are most valuable for these two teams. So I would just try to stay away from the Bears receivers as well as figuring out who's the number 3 option over at Indianapolis. T.O., he certainly wouldn't be a bad idea to have for as your third receiver, but try to avoid drafting T.O. as your number 1 or number 2 receiver. A couple of quarterbacks in Brett Favre and Philip Rivers for 2 different reasons. I think that Brett Favre is on the way out. I think this may be his year that he suffers an injury, or just goes out playing really bad. And Philip Rivers is a very good quarterback, but I just see with Vincent Jackson being out for the first 4 games, you want to try to avoid him being your number 1 quarterback because certainly that's going to hurt his value a little bit. And the same thing with Brandon Pettigrew. I would try to avoid Chris Cooley because he's not even the only tight end option on that team. So try to avoid having Chris Cooley as your number 1 tight end. And Greg Olsen, I'm sure we've all heard of Greg Olsen has that Mike Marshall's offense isn't very favorable to tight ends. He's certainly a good tight end, but I would also try to avoid him being your number 1 tight end. And sleepers. Got some rookies on here, and leading the way is Ryan Matthews. He's going to have a very good season. He may even put up first-round numbers. Um, Donald Brown and Bradshaw are 2 guys that I can see winning the job, taking the job from Brad Jacobs and Joseph Adai this year. C.J. Spiller, like Matthews, he's gonna have a very good season, just not as good as Matthews. His team just isn't is good enough to help him be as good as Matthews. Justin Forsett is going to be leading Seattle, and he's going to put up some second round numbers, I believe, this year. Malcolm Floyd is going to shine without Vincent Jackson, and even with Vincent Jackson there, I think that Malcolm Floyd is going to have a very good season. Chad Shillings from Oakland looked like he had a lot of promise last year, and then he got hurt, and I see him coming out and having a really good breakout season for Oakland this year with Jason Campbell at home. Couple more rookies and McCluster and Tate. Um, McCluster, just think Percy Harvin clone. I think that he can put up similar numbers than Harvin. I think Golden Tate, because his team's so bad, and they may be behind a lot, and they still have a very good, decent quarterback throwing. I think that he gonna get a lot better numbers than you would see Des Bryant get. Chad Henning, he got Brandon Marshall now. He's a very good quarterback. You can see him definitely breaking out this year. Jay Cutler got Mike Marshall's offense. He's going to put up some good numbers this year. I think Jason Campbell wants to prove Washington wrong, and I think he's going to come out and have a coming out party. And second-year player Mark Sanchez, I think that with Santana Holmes and on the team, and hopefully Braylon Edwards getting a little better, you're going to see him. I think you're going to see him have a very good season this year. And if you have anything else you want to ask me, shoot an email, fantasyfirstaid@hotmail.com. If you just want the list, I can certainly send you those files over. This has been the Tutor signing out.